And I've been in and out of newsrooms since I was a baby. My actual grandmother worked at ABC, the ABC affiliate in Philadelphia, and she was a switchboard operator. That's how.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Um,
you're like a Lady Ron Burgundy.
if only I were as smooth as Ron Burgundy.
Ah.
I'm not far from San Diego. You know.
Do you have many leather-bound books?
Hello and welcome to the Coralosophy Podcast. My name is Chris Muntz. This is episode 98. You Are Your Story with Brent Mordan, Michelle Pollino, and Angel Eduardo. There is a new initiative from a new organization called FAIR, and it's called FAIR in the Arts. Now, FAIR stands for Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. This is an organization that I've told you a little bit about in the past, and I've made a recent posts about it. I've made some blogs about this idea that we have to think about group identity. We have to think about immutable characteristics. Those things do play into our experience as humans in the world. We can't ignore those things, but they are not the only things. And this is really important to have a conversation about how we lead in these kind of difficult and sometimes toxic conversations. What do I lead with? Do I lead with the fact that as a XYZ, fill in the blank of things that I cannot control about myself, I have authority in this conversation? Or do we lead with, I'm a human, you're a human, let's just talk about this? And of course, I believe, obviously, I'm a podcaster, I believe in the talking. I believe in the conversation. I believe in hearing your story. I believe in telling you stories. Because these are how we get to know each other. I've been doing this show now for over 3 years, and I feel like I've created tons of relationships from people who have gotten to know me through the stories that I tell about myself. Also, they've gotten to know my guests through the stories that they tell about themselves. And that is the way forward. It is the ability for me to feel free to genuinely be myself. And you then feel the freedom to genuinely be yourself. We can talk about all the lofty goals of every social justice policy that we want, every equity policy that we want in organizations and schools. All of those things are great to talk about, but ultimately we're not going to get there, everybody. We will not get there if we don't fix this part first, which is that I see you, you see me, and we talk. We have to be able to do that, or nothing else that we put on our Instagram stories or whichever memes we share, none of those dreams will come true. Because we live in a political world, number one, there are realities there, and we live in a very diverse world. And I don't mean diverse, as you're going to hear Angel say later, diverse in terms of melanin. I mean diverse in terms of how we see the world around us, what we care about, our moral palettes, all of the things that make us who we are. If I were to take a photograph, simply a photograph of a group of people, and let's say there's a black man and a white woman and an Asian man and a Hispanic trans person, and I could list a bunch of other categories, right? And if I were to show you this photograph and I were to say, is this a diverse group of people? I'm afraid that many people would say yes. Look at all those categories represented in that photograph. And I would just shake my head and I would probably face palm, because that's not the right answer. The right answer to that question is, I don't have enough information from a photograph. If I were you to show me that photograph with every category of people you could imagine represented in that photograph, is this a diverse group of people? The answer is, I don't have enough information. Why? Because I've never talked to any of those people. I don't know who they are. I don't know what they believe in. I don't know their religion. I don't know their philosophical background. I don't know their education. I don't know what country they came from. I don't know what language they speak. I don't know what their favorite band is. I don't know what their favorite movie is. I don't know if that's a diverse group of people, because it's very possible that they all think the same things about 5 of the most important topics in the world, and they all agree on all of them. In which case, is it a diverse group of people? I would argue no. No, it is not. So that's kind of where we're going here with this conversation, is how do we have in the arts those types of conversations? How do we have conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion that are more diverse and include more things? than immutable characteristics, because I think that all of those things matter. However, they are not the only things. And so that's what we're going to dive into with Brent, Michelle, and Angel, all who work with FAIR, and they're going to tell us more about FAIR in the arts in just a minute. Before we get there, I would like to do a quick shout out. Don't forget, Patreon is a place where you can support the show. If you believe in the mission of this show, which is a conversation activism that we believe in here, you can join Patreon. In fact, I even got a new mug for the merch tier at Patreon. Patreon.com/Choralosophy. You can get your own coffee mug that says Choralosophy Podcast, Better Conversation Activist. And as you sip your coffee, you can be an activist with me and try to build a world where we are able to have better conversations. All of the producer level and above sponsors on Patreon are Brannigan Lawrence, Vasquez Academy of Music, John Warner, Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Angie Schilling, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, Kyle Peterson, Jeff Wall, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, and Stephen Kathy Kakachik. And the last thing I'll say before the conversation is thank you for, it's been a hot minute since I've done one of these full-length episodes. Thank you for waiting, as I do have to have a family time. So we had a spring break a little bit over the last couple of weeks, so it's been a while since I've recorded a full episode. I hope you enjoy this one. Here comes Brent and Michelle and Angel. Okay, everybody, I'm here with a group, which I'm really excited about. I've got Michelle Pollino, Brent Mordan, and Angel Eduardo all here to talk with us about a new initiative called FAIR in the Arts. Now, FAIR stands for Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, and they have just launched recently, last month, an arts initiative, an arts division. And we're going to, since we care very much on the Choralosophy podcast about the arts and arts education, the future of the arts industry, then we're going to talk about this initiative, this organization, and hopefully spread the word. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here. Yeah, great to
Thanks
be
for
here.
having me.
This is going to be fun. Okay, so let's just go across, let everybody introduce themselves. Michelle, let's start with you. Who are you, and what are you doing here?
Well, I'm a human being that lives in Los Angeles, and I work in the entertainment industry. I'm an entertainment reporter for Fox News Radio. I've been in news, in and out of newsrooms, pretty much every single one that you know of, most of my life. And I'm also a film producer. I produced a number of films. You might know GBF. That's a pretty fun film, Gay Best Friend. And I've written and directed several short films and just finished my memoir. So I'm very excited. Just completed my memoir. So I'm very excited.
That's awesome. That's very cool. Now, as an entertainment reporter, I just have to ask, are you okay after all of the Will Smith slapped drama? Like, have you calmed down?
I loved Angel's tweet about it. I thought, we're going to hear from everyone, including like the ants that are climbing into the ant farm in my front lawn. Like, everybody is going to have an opinion about this.
Yep.
That's hilarious.
So yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad you survived.
I survived it.
That's great. Brent, who are you?
That's a great question. So, hey, everybody, I'm Brent Mordan. I am a composer, music director, vocalist, and teacher, originally from Queens, New York, still living in Queens, New York. And outside of FAIR, I manage a children's choir organization. A lot of my work is in the choral world, teaching children's choirs, singing, private voice lessons, musical theater, and I'm all about the arts. So happy to be here, happy to talk with you three amazing folks about FAIR in the arts.
Awesome. And Angel, my audience knows you, but give them a quick rundown.
Yeah, I think this is number 3 for me.
Yeah.
Choralosophy. So I've either endeared myself or annoyed the hell out of your audience by now. I'm a writer, musician. I do photography and design and all sorts of stuff. I kind of just say I'm a compulsive creative. And I'm actually working with FAIR directly. I'm director of messaging and editorial for FAIR. So I'm trying very hard to be of assistance with, fine tuning the messaging, making sure we're getting it right. So that's what I've been doing lately. And I'm also a fellow for FAIR in the Arts, as is Michelle. And Yeah, I'm really excited about this initiative. I think it's beautiful and important.
That's
I'm
great.
excited.
In fact, let's start with you, Angel, then, since you're working directly in the messaging for FAIR as a broader organization. Tell
Yeah.
folks what FAIR is, and start at the very beginning, as in like how is it structured? What is its goal? What's its mission? Give us the
Right.
message.
Yeah. So FAIR was founded by Brian Bartning, um, slightly after pulling his kids out of school because he was very concerned about the sorts of policies and programs that were being implemented with regard to how children should see themselves in terms of race and how they should interact with one another. It struck him as, you know, someone who is of a multi-ethnic background. It struck him as incredibly divisive and headed in the wrong direction from someone like MLK. And so that prompted him to pull his kids out and eventually founding the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism to provide what he calls a pro-human approach to the issues of racism in our society and you know all the kind of connected issues of, you know, how do we teach history, how can we be honest about it, how do we have conversations about race, um, how do we deal with these realities, you know, of bigotry and the, you know, the history and the systems that are in place, and how do we move forward together, how do we do it in a way that isn't inadvertently divisive and essentialist in terms of race. So, you know, the mission of FAIR is, you know, it's a nonpartisan organization and it's dedicated to advancing civil rights and liberties for all and promoting a common culture of fairness, understanding, and humanity. Those are the three core tenets.
Right. That's awesome. Don't forget, of course, everybody, that you have promo codes that you can use at a variety of excellent vendors and excellent people, by the way, who serve our music education industry. There's graphitepublishing.com, ryanmain.com for sheet music, Sight Reading Factory. You're going to get all of your student codes, all of your teacher membership, 10% off at all those websites. Then, of course, you can go to mymusicfolders.com for your N95 grade singer's masks, a variety of other types of singer's masks, choir folders, choir robes, and those all those websites have Choirlosophy checkout codes that'll knock a fraction of that cost off. It helps me a lot, helps you a lot. It's a win-win. So be sure to do that whenever you have product needs. Awesome. So one of the things that I've noticed, and I want to get everybody in on this one, is that that we have been over the last couple of years presented with a ton of in education, online, in the arts in particular. We've been presented with this idea that there is a social and a political justice goal, and that there is a prescribed way to go about achieving that goal. And namely, we get things like what I would go so far as to call a kind of a race essentialist view of who people are. I would call it also an identity first view. And in other words, what do we lead with? We're supposed to lead with our identity categories. And we're supposed to then aggregate all of the averages of how people who identify the way we do, how they perform in society. In other words, what their outcomes are by averages. And we're supposed to use that information as evidence for a policy that, whatever it is, so to even that playing field. And what I've felt, and the reason I was excited to see what FAIR is doing, is that I don't think that that's a great way to go about organizing society, number one, by organizing society based around quotas for things that we can't choose about ourselves. That's not a super smart thing. But I also don't. This is where it gets tricky. I've talked to Brent before about this, where I might be on any panel, I might be the wokest person here, because I also at the same time, I understand as an educator that when you look at some of those averages and some of those breakdowns by different categories, you do see disparities, and we don't like those. We don't want there to be those things. But at the same time, I don't feel super comfortable with the way we always talk about it. And so FAIR provides an alternative, which I think is important, because I don't want to throw away any person who really believes in DEI work for example. I don't want to throw you out. I just want to have some other ways to talk about this. And I think FAIR offers that. So I want to go through the panel and have everybody share a little bit of their own thoughts about why we need that alternative and how FAIR maybe even provides that alternative. And Michelle, let's start with you if you could.
Well, I like what you said about how some people kind of view the world here in Los Angeles. It's a very binary thinking area. And people see the lens through good and evil, and that's it. Like, this is good and that is evil. There is no nuance, no room for nuance at all. I think about, I take a hike in the Baldwin Hills near my house, and there's a creek. And you know what they do out here to the creeks? They Disneyfy them. You know what that means?
No.
That they color them in a beautiful kind of teal color. They Disneyfy the creeks and the lakes because they think it gives them a better appeal, a better look. That horrifies me.
Yeah.
It horrifies me because it's unnatural. It's just, we're not appreciating the natural beauty of life. But in the mindset here is well, no, this is beautiful. And we're taking, nature, and we're making it more beautiful. This is the way. This is the only, they do it to all of the lakes and creeks.
Huh.
Because everybody kind of goes along and thinks that that's okay. I like nuance. I would love to find a park where a creek is not Disneyfied. Because
hilarious.
It is kind of hilarious.
I didn't know that.
And because for me, seeing things differently enables creative expression. It gives me the ability to, that's interesting. That lake doesn't look like that. So then all of a sudden I'm thinking differently. And that is what FAIR does for me. It gives me different perspectives from just the good and evil narrative. The lines in between the good and evil are extraordinary. You can make music from them. You can create paintings from them. And the amount of creativity that comes in between, in those moments in between, is what an artist, I think that's literally the jumping off point. And I wasn't finding that in the conversations out here. And my girlfriend said, I don't want to hear you anymore. So she said, join an organization. And I literally was like, okay. And that's where I found FAIR and the different perspectives there. I also want to give a shout out to Braver Angels, which another organization that I absolutely adore. So yes, it's the nuance that I find that gives my life new meaning.
Right. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Brent, why does FAIR offer that badly needed alternative for us in conversations around identity, around justice, around societal reshaping and reframing?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's the real question here. And going off what you're saying, Michelle, really beautifully about nuance is that a lot of the conversations and discussions and approaches that we have in institutions, artistic or educational, have when it comes to identity politics or identity issues, it's very hot. They're hot button issues. They're hard to talk about with a reasonable, fair approach. It often devolves into emotional based debates or arguments. And a lot of the ideas that FAIR grew out of, which is recognizing that in my child's classroom, they're learning these emotionally based or intolerant, cynical viewpoints of how we're viewing ourselves in the world. there's no nuance there. There's no nuance there. And there's a better way to talk about identity issues. I think the better way is what Fair articulates, which is recognizing that we're all human at the end of the day, right? This is the what we call the pro-human approach, that I'm sure we'll talk more about this in detail, which is that if we want to have a conversation, it's recognizing that you're also a human being, and that we can have disagreements. And that, for example, when it comes to race, ethnicity, nationality, these immutable characteristics, that there are more important things that unite us as human beings than what we see just on the face of somebody else. And unfortunately, there's been an overemphasis in a lot of our institutions, artistic, educational, cultural, which is what Fair and the Arts grew out of, that is overemphasizing identity and saying, for example, that the theater or Hollywood is rooted in white supremacy, or it's based on this oppression of minorities, without really asserting any evidence or providing any evidence. Because if there is, first of all, that's illegal. Second of all, I think it's hard to counter that argument, or it's hard to counter that position without being shouted down or being viewed as intolerant or a bigot, like you said earlier. So Fair is saying that's not the right approach. That's not the right approach. And there's so many of us, like all four of us here, who recognize that there is there's something wrong with the way that we're having conversations about identity issues nowadays in school, in our institutions. There's something wrong. There's something not quite right when I'm self-censoring in a rehearsal from saying boys and girls or men and women, especially in a choir, right? Just things that are standard parts of our rehearsal, our lexicon, we're self-censoring because there's this intolerance against what might be perceived as not inclusive or not abiding by this diversity, equity, and inclusion mandate. Here's the thing about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those ideas by themselves at face value, I think there's nothing wrong with them. And the problem is that many, academia, institutions have perverted them to serve activist goals that are really, truly not embracing diversity. For example, diversity of opinion, or truly not being inclusivity of thought, and placing overemphasis on our immutable characteristics like race and sex versus what do we bring to the table. So all that is to say, Fair is recognizing this and saying, if you see this too, and you see that there's a problem in the way that culture is approaching identity conversations, then we have a home for you, and we're ready to actually speak the truth from a perspective that recognizes our common humanity.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So one of the things I want to circle back into was something you just said, Brent, because I think it's important, which is you're talking about certain institutions of higher ed or professional organizations that are really kind of diving into these ideas in a way that might be, like you said, an overemphasis without evidence. But here's my problem too: it's without specificity. It always seems to be a very nebulous accusation of in the ether somewhere, but there's never a person who's done something wrong, and there's never a specific instance. And the problem with that, of course, is it's impossible to fix if you don't have a specific issue that you can point to. And so I think that's that alarm bell for me from the beginning, years ago. Was that it's like, okay, I think racism is bad too, and I think bigotry is bad too, but I need some help seeing it here. And one of the possible answers to that question has to be, well, maybe actually there isn't any here, and that's the other thing that never seems to be happening. Is there never seems to be the possibility, well, that the answer is, oh well, we looked for some racism, we couldn't find it, so now we need to move on.
Right.
Racism
detected.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to give you an example of what you're talking about, which is I think about a month ago, a few weeks ago, Actors Equity Association, which is one of the largest labor unions for performing arts professionals, published their jobs report, their diversity, their report about diversity in hiring for theater jobs for the union. And there are a few really, really wonderful quotes that I think show us what we're talking about here. Quote, As with any American institution, equity was built on a foundation formed with all the biases present within the US society. As an organization, we have also been complicit in implicit white supremacy. We share the responsibility to hashtag change the stage as much as the employers and every other stakeholder in theater. Another quote being, quote, these employers, theater producers, tend to be white or men or both. And like all people, they have implicit biases that make it more likely for them to offer opportunities to workers from similar backgrounds to their own than to others, which that's, I mean,
I think that sometimes happens.
That sometimes happens.
It does sometimes happen. Yes.
And if it happens, it ought to be called out, right? It ought to be addressed.
Yep.
But the problem with this approach, it's making broad swaths of these general statements that are first of all non-specific. They're not really providing evidence, or if they are, they're misconstruing the evidence. Because when it comes to I do musicals, right? I wrote a musical last year. We went through a casting process. I hired people for my bands. I was just hiring people for a band for a recording session. Like I care about other things. I want to make sure that you can play well. I want to make sure that we can work well together. Are you a good musician? Are you a good sport? Because your race or your religion or your sexuality has nothing to do with your skill or your talent. And I want to be able to just hire you based on what you can bring to the table. But the idea that actors equity is pushing here is that no, we always have to keep this framework of white supremacy, that we always have to keep this in mind, and that there are certain groups that are oppressed. But that's escalating. That's escalating rather than de-escalating. That's causing more tensions, and that's not. If you want to solve race relations and make us live in harmony, because life is hard enough, man. Life is full of suffering. We want to just be able to live together in peace and respect. This is not the right way to do it. The right way is the fair way, which anybody with common sense, anybody who grew up with good values in a good household, who grew up with the golden rule, understands that we just, if we want to live in harmony, we see each other as our brothers or sisters.
Yeah.
That the golden rule, we treat other people as you would like to be treated. And that's the way. That's what FAIR is articulating. And a lot of people are coming to FAIR, like all of us, and people I've had phone conversations with as a chapter coordinator in New York City with FAIR in the Arts are saying, wow, finally, somebody and an organization that is saying what we've been thinking this whole time for so long, and feeling afraid to actually say, hey, maybe there isn't as much racism as these organization and mainstream publications are saying there is. If there is, that's a problem, and let's address it. We can have both. Yeah,
and like I said, it does happen, and it happens way too much. That people, especially I would call it affinity hiring, where somebody is not thinking consciously, I'm going to hire other people who have the same skin color as me. That's pretty rare, I think, in 2022. But I do think that it is an issue where I'm familiar and I'm comfortable with you culturally, therefore I will hire you more likely, or I'm more likely to hire you. I think that does happen. The issue, though, is, as Brent pointed out, it doesn't give you enough information to just say that we as an organization are doing this. I need to know how to fix those things, and I need to know how to zero in on them. Does anyone else want to jump in on this topic?
Well, there are some. I mean, the problem is that there are so many complications when you actually sit down and start to try to address the issue, right? So, keeping it in the arts, we've heard the story of the symphony orchestra not having enough women, and the consensus from the hiring people was, well, they just don't sound as good, right? But then they started doing blind auditions, where the musician is behind a screen, you can't tell what they are. Suddenly more women start populating the symphony orchestra. Suddenly the orchestra sounds great, and there's plenty of women there. And so that was a correction to something that was implicitly happening, right? No one was necessarily consciously, discriminating against women there, they had biases and they didn't see them. And this method kind of allowed for us to check it and correct it, right? But now we have this situation where people want the blind audition removed because it hasn't allowed for the kind of, racial parity that they want, or racial proportionality that they want, right? The orchestra is not 13% Black. So
Or that they
what do we do?
assumed would
Let's,
happen. Or
right.
that somebody assumed would happen. Right.
Right. So so the assumption there is that, well, there must be bigotry of some other kind. But instead of figuring out another way to, like, an analogous sort of thing for the blind audition, what they do is remove the blind audition and then just artificially add people in based on their immutable characteristics, which has, probably the effect of making the orchestra not sound as good as it could, because the primary metric there isn't how good they are, right? It has to be first their racial categorization, and then how good they sound. So there's that. But there's also, I mean, for the musicians themselves, there's always kind of, I would feel this way, and I have been in this position. I feel like there's an asterisk next to my name, where it's like, well, I don't know if I'm here because of why I hope I'm here. I don't know if it's just because you need somebody who looks like me to be here.
I have had,
and that even just that ambiguity sucks, right?
I've had so many listeners to this show who are in the arts and in music write in private to tell me, because they know I would listen, listeners of color, I don't know if I want to apply for X, Y, or Z because I'm not sure if I can trust Y, I would get it.
Right.
And
that sucks.
And they won't say it publicly.
Right. Yeah, because it's tough. There are many accusations that have been thrown at me for bringing this sort of stuff up. But we really have to think about that. Like, the very group that you're trying to help is actually feeling, not harmed in that sort of sense, but it's definitely negatively affecting them, right? It's spoiling this rich that you're giving them, right? This thing that you're giving them that they so desire, because of the way it's being given to them. And there are better ways. It's just more complicated, right? So it's like, how come people of this particular demographic are not doing as well in auditions when the auditions are blind? How come? Let's figure that out.
As a music educator, I can answer that really easily.
Well, there you go. All right.
It's okay. It's not an easy thing to solve, but it's a very easy question to answer, which is that there is a bigotry in music education, but it's not by skin color, it's by zip code.
Right.
And it is that if you grow up in a certain type of place, usually city schools, which of course are disproportionately not white, and that's where people get confused. They see that's where the kid lives disproportionately. We have now a higher percentage of kids in white suburban school districts that have these big, robust music education programs. Kids 10 minutes away in the city are being cheated out of that fundamental music education that the white kids 10 minutes down the road are getting.
Right.
The problem is you take away the blind auditions and you start letting kids in who did not get that foundation, then you are absolving this pisses me off if you can't tell. You were absolving those administrations of those corrupt city school districts that are not giving those kids the education that they deserve, because now they get to put on their banner that such and such students from their school got accepted to XYZ, even though they weren't actually taught those things.
Right.
And so then they look better. The administrators look better. The hirers at the orchestra look better. Everybody looks better. The person that doesn't get anything better is those children in those schools that are still not being taught what a quarter note is.
Right.
Wow.
And so to me, that's where I turn sideways with this topic over and over with people, because it does not solve anything to take away the blind audition and, as Angel said, put people in arbitrarily. That doesn't solve anything. In fact, if anything, that harms kids.
It absolutely does. The one of Ferris' principles is the fundamental dignity of every individual human being. And I have felt my dignity compromised when people see me this way and treat me this way. They're erasing me as a person, and they're turning me into an avatar for some identity group, regardless of how well I even fit into that identity group. We've talked about that before.
And
But
I've heard that from many of my friends as well.
yeah,
Many of my Black friends talk about how they are starting, they're questioning themselves at night when they are laying there. Did I get the role, or did I get the part because I fit a quota, or, and that is hurting society. That is,
and you're right. And another aspect of this is that things like quotas, identity-based quotas, are based on really a false worldview, because not every individual who is a racial minority experienced suffering in their own personal circumstances. Plenty of people who were of these what might be considered privileged groups, like, which happen, I guess, nowadays are white or men or straight. A lot of these people have experienced a lot of suffering in their lives and hardships. You look at me, you see a guy who looks like a white male, but you might not. If you look at me, you don't know my family history. You don't know where I'm coming from. You don't know that both my parents are refugees from the Soviet Union, and my grandparents survived the Holocaust, and my family endured a lot of suffering to come before they came to the United States to find opportunity. And opportunity is really the way forward. There are programs that do it right. There are programs, and I've seen it. I'll give you an example. In New York City, which is where I came up. I came up in Queens, which is naturally a very diverse borough of New York, in the most honest, genuine way, because we have immigrant communities from all around the world, like my own family, who came here to find a better life and just to plant roots here. And so
I live in Queens too, and I actually think Queens is the most diverse population of people per capita in the world.
Wow.
It is. And very briefly, one program that I saw, I think did it right, is there's a summer arts program that ran for the last couple of decades, where they auditioned. It was an auditioned 4-week intensive open to New York City public school students. And so they set the bar high to encourage these students to find excellence within themselves, regardless of race, regardless of, no matter where you came from. It empowered students to find the excellence within themselves and audition to get into this really wonderful program that provides an amazingly enriching arts experience 5 days a week for 4 weeks, all these different studios. And the thing about this is, when I was interning at this program for 2 summers, it was naturally diverse and inclusive in a true, genuine way. It welcomed everybody. It said, if you have what it takes to be here, you can be here. And plenty of kids who came from poor backgrounds, who had divorced parents, who you don't know what was happening in their lives, they found that an empowering opportunity. And that's the way forward.
Yeah.
I just want to
go ahead, Michelle.
Your story is at the heart of FAIR, and that is looking at you and judging you on the basis of your immutable characteristics. We never know your history. The pro-human approach is looking at a person as a person and understanding that they have a rich history, a diverse history, and your job as a human is to learn that through your conversation with another human being. And that connection happens in that moment. And this is at the heart of FAIR. The pro-human approach is not looking at somebody based on what you see, but understanding that they are a human with a story, and connection and conversation gets to their story and gets to the larger story of this globe.
Right. So yeah, Michelle, I agree. And I think that when as I talk to you, I'm not talking to you as a white man, and I'm not talking to you as a white woman, because I don't have the authority to do that. So I don't have the authority to say, as a white man, I think X, Y, and Z, and Brent just has to nod along.
Right.
Like
Right.
that.
Right.
it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And I think that, and this is something that frustrates me too, is that we hear so often that X, Y, and Z group are not a monolith, and we shouldn't assume things about them, yet we do it all the time.
Right.
We do it all the time.
Right.
And so so I think this is where that dichotomy for me comes in, where I want to know, like, and this will kind of maybe put a pin in the coffin of the blind audition topic we were just talking about, where I do want to know aggregate numbers and data about groups that are not getting access to things in the arts. I
Yeah.
want to know those things because, but to me, they serve a purpose. That those numbers and those averages serve a purpose, more like a canary in a coal mine. They tell me something's going on.
Yeah.
We're not getting any black kids in the orchestra. What is going on?
Right.
But one of the answers could be racism. But we also need to know that one of the answers could be also not racism. There could be other things that are going into that, and that's where I provided my answer, which is poor quality of education in a lot of school districts.
Right.
And I would, but I do want to know those numbers because that gives me information as somebody who does want to solve problems of, okay, now where do we go look? Well, we need to go to those schools and help them out through nonprofits, through arts organizations, through
Right.
Educational outreach, those types of things to help in those situations. So
And
I think
to throw a bone there,
Yeah.
I think the reason why we have poor quality schools in these particular zip codes probably absolutely have to do with racism, right?
Yes.
In the past, right? Like
Yes.
the reason why people are here is because people before them settled there, and for whatever reason, and the reason for the circumstances people find themselves in is obviously in the past. So yeah, sure, racism caused it. Let's just say 100%. The reason why this particular school in this particular city is underserved is because of a historical and even systematic racism towards the people
right.
who found themselves there.
Yes, Angel.
But
Yeah, you're exactly right. What I meant was maybe not racism on the part of the hirer at the orchestra. Maybe,
right, exactly.
maybe
Right. So
that
it's just kind of
person's
like
not. Yeah, maybe the
it's
orchestra.
reverberations of previous
Right.
stuff. And
Yeah.
Yes.
and but the bigger point is that more racism isn't the solution to
There
that.
it is. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
The solution is something like what you said, was like, all right, well, the problem right now is that there's no music program. So how can the future, Jimi Hendrix or the future Aretha Franklin become that if there's no possibility, if there's no route for them to take, right? I mean, I could be as brilliant as, predisposed to be as brilliant as I can possibly be. Einstein, if he was just born in a basement and there was not a single book in sight and he never was taught math, he never was taught to write, he wouldn't be Einstein, right? Like that needed to happen. He needed to be educated in a way to facilitate that talent, to bring it out of him. Right. And that's what's basically we're just having all this talent and letting it rot on the vine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tragedy. I mean,
Yeah.
I want more Aretha Franklins, right? Like, let's go get
Don't
them.
we all? Don't we all?
need them, Yeah.
But yeah, and this is again what FAIR provides. I think what we're looking to do with FAIR in the arts is have conversations, have workshops where we can have these discussions, where I've tried to have these discussions with data, especially with a lot of the programs here in Hollywood and in Los Angeles, in particular, Aperture 2024. Like, we can't just continue to just put people in positions just because of their immutable characteristics. We have to figure out where the problem started. And like we all said, we're not able to have these conversations. I have never been able to have a conversation outside of FAIR with any of my friends because I've been immediately slapped down and called a racist.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what FAIR provides. We really want to find solutions. We want to create the pathway to finding the solution, because right now people are just throwing dirt on our pathway, but FAIR is clearing the dirt away so we can drive down the road and make progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Michelle, I want to stick with you for a second because a minute ago you started talking a little bit about the pro-human idea, and I want to go through the panel too and let us all kind of say a little bit more about what it means to us to have a pro-human approach. Is there anything you can add, Michelle, about what that means to you when you hear that term?
I just look at you and I'm so interested in your interior life. I look at Angel and I'm interested in your interior life. And same thing goes for Brent. When I look at another person, I so want to hear the stories inside them. And that to me is the pro-human approach. That's what drives me. It's my desire to connect through conversation with another human being, not just a color or a race or a heritage. Each of us is such a complicated, gorgeous human with so many stories to tell and how they intersect with life.
Yeah.
That's what being an artist is all about, is telling those stories, whether it's through a musical note or through a word on a page. That's the pro-human approach.
Now, of course, I know that there will be people listening to this, and they will hear, oh, so Michelle doesn't care about my experience as a Black person or as a person, as a gay person. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that that's not what you meant.
Thank you for thank you for that. It's part of, I'm gay. It's part of who I am, but it's not all of me.
There you go.
A part of me. I love that story, but I also have many other great stories. You know, my grandfather was the cut man for Sonny Liston. That's an incredible story. That's really, it's just a part of who we are. We're extraordinary human beings, and so much of us is being stifled into one category.
Well, I think we're finding out that we get more rewards in the form of likes and loves and retweets if we make our online life more about our immutable characteristics. If we include something about our identities in our story, we're being incentivized to make that the first thing that we notice. I mean, we're putting it in our bios. Yeah. We're putting our skin colors in our bios as if they can't see that in our profile picture. You know,
right.
And that's bizarre. But that's kind of a different topic. Brent, what does pro-human mean to you?
Yeah, it's Michelle. It's hard to follow you because you phrase everything so beautifully. It's poetry flowing out of your mouth.
Well, that's beautiful to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes back. It's very simple, right? It's when you look at me or I look at you or we look at other people, we see a human being first and recognize that, you know, if we can see color, right? I see that, you know, there are different shades of our skin and people have different sexes and sexual orientations, and there are differences among humans. People are different heights. People have different IQs. There's a wide diversity of human beings, and we can embrace that and recognize that. And also at the same time, recognize that we have more important things in common. Just the fact that we are here on this earth in this strange, beautiful experience called life, that we're all just trying to figure it out, right? We all want the same. This is something that Daryl Davis, one of our fellows at FAIR and FAIR in the Arts, talks about in really beautifully, which is that as human beings, we all fundamentally want the same few things. I think he includes love, right? We all want to be loved. We all want to love. We want to be respected and feel respect. And we want to be understood and heard. That's an important thing. That's what being pro-human is. It's just seeing other people as human beings first. And for example, recognizing like that what you said, Michelle, that if you're gay, that's not the most important thing about you. And that is an interesting story, and we can listen to that and embrace that. But there are more important things that bring us together. It's about unity, right?
Yeah, that's great. Angel, what does being pro-human mean to you?
This is funny because it's the question that I ask every guest at the end of our Fair Perspectives podcast now.
Yeah.
And I haven't had the chance to actually answer it myself on air. Well, I'll say that Fair's definition of pro-human is advocating for one human race, individual civil rights and liberties, and a compassionate opposition to racism and intolerance, and that it's rooted in our dignity and our common humanity. So that's the official position. For me, pro-human to me is very much an action. It's very much it's a verb. It's almost, it's thinking of things as being, what are you for rather than what you're against. So much of what we do seems to be about defining ourselves in the negative space of all the things we don't like, right? Like we take out all the things we hate and there's a shape left over, and that's us. But that's not very much, right? And the way that I've been trying to articulate it to people is, for those of you who are watching this, you can see what I look like, right? What do you know about me? Nothing. Basically nothing at all, apart from literally the physical things you can notice. Right now, if I tell you I'm first generation Dominican American, right? My parents immigrated here from the Dominican Republic. What do you know about me now? Probably less, because now there's a bunch of assumptions filling your head about what kind of food I eat, what I like to do for fun, right? All this sort of stuff is filling your head, and you have to actually combat it in order to see me, because you're going to be wrong about a lot of those things, right? Because they're stereotypes.
Yep.
But if I tell you my favorite movie is Pulp Fiction, if I tell you that my favorite song of all time is Bohemian Rhapsody, now you see me. Now you start to see someone that isn't just Dominican, that isn't just a first generation American, that isn't just a New Yorker, right? You're starting to see an individual human being. That's what pro-human is to me. It's about recognizing that drilling down all the way into the individual is where all that beauty lies. And this kind of, another way that I say it is that we fail to either zoom out far enough or zoom in close enough. We seem to get ourselves stuck in this low resolution middle where everything's fuzzy and everything is kind of, there's no way to distinguish, right? But we should drill all the way down. We should zoom all the way in to the individual, or zoom all the way out to humanity. Like, this is all of us. We are here. This is all of this belongs to all of us, and let's figure it out. So pro-human to me is about, those two poles and reconciling them and the beauty of all that.
That's great. That's great. I'll share a little bit about my own pro-human definition, which essentially synthesizes a lot of what you guys have just said. And I'm going to start by pulling something out of what Brent said, which is that we see color, we see sexuality, we see nationality, we see any types of group memberships. We can see those, we can celebrate them, but we don't see them first. Like, to me, that's huge. Like, that's a huge aspect of my definition of being pro-human, is that I see those things, I love them, I want to hear the stories, I want to, if those are associated with a struggle in your life, I want to hear that, I want you to tell me about that, but I don't see that first. I see you first. And to me, that's what being pro-human means. Is it in a sense, it's being able to put on my individual goggles when I'm talking about you and your life, and then taking some of what Angel said too, which is just to not make assumptions. Like, but that's hard. Like you have to really work hard to not make assumptions about other people. And I don't know that we can not ever do it.
Yeah.
It's just we shouldn't lean into it, and I feel like that's the alternative. Like we're being taught to lean into the assumptions.
Yeah, we are being taught. I like it. I think I might.
That's good.
I think that what we're saying, this also ties us into back to art, right?
Mhm.
Because art, what is art? Why do we write songs? Why do we listen to songs? Why do people go to the theater? Why do people see movies? Why do people make art? Where I think we all have a story to tell. And that comes back to us as individuals. We all have a story to tell, and we all want to hear stories. That's a fundamentally human thing. And I think in many ways, art, music, drama, film, whatever is expressing our unique humanity and just expressing what it means to be us on this earth and what are we thinking about. Like, I'm a composer. I wrote lots of music all throughout high school, and I had ideas in my head that I needed to get on paper. I could not live with myself if I did not write my music, because it expressed something within me that I could not put into words, and I had to put into music. When I first listened to, I actually have this is coincidental, a coaster. My coaster is Songs in the Key of Life. Stevie Wonder, my favorite album, my favorite artist. The first time I listened to it, I was doing homework in junior year of high school, because I listened to music while doing homework, and I couldn't finish my homework because I was just captivated by the beauty and the honesty in Stevie's songwriting and Stevie's singing. And I was able to appreciate it just as another human being. And I think that comes back to what art is and what art does and what Fair in the Arts articulates about art.
We do art with each other and for each other, so that we can experience each other's heart. Right. And in that metaphorical sense, it's an expression of the heart. And what I would like to avoid in the arts community is having to put a filter over that. Right. Because I want it to be heart to heart. And no, with no filter between, with no cheesecloth to strain it. To strain it through.
Oh man, absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely, dude. I had the honor and the pleasure of seeing Stevie Wonder perform Songs in the Key of Life live.
Me too.
Where?
We went to the Barclays Center. My girlfriend at the time, she got me tickets for my birthday. She's my wife now.
Was this
in no small part because of that?
I think we might have gone to the same concert.
Probably.
Wow.
Several years ago.
I think, I forget exactly when, 2016 or 2015 maybe. But I mean, the minute the music started, like within 4 or 5 beats, the first song is just vocals, and it's just this beautiful harmonized thing, and instantly I'm just crying my eyes out. I'm just crying my eyes out, and I turned to my girlfriend, now my wife, and I just said, like, thank you so much. This is the most incredible thing I've ever heard. 2 seconds. That's art. That's the beauty of that, right? I don't know Stevie Wonder. He's never met me. He wrote those songs before I was born. But that's what art, that's what it does. It connects so deeply with people across time and space. I mean, art is time travel. Art is this kind of psychic bridge between all people. People sing along to songs that they don't even speak the language. They have no idea what those words mean, but they feel it, and it's just incredible. I mean, so I totally to be more crass than you, Chris, I like raw dogging with art. I don't want anything.
That's pretty great. That's pretty great.
Michelle, what's up?
Art is magic. Art is connection. That's why Fair in the Arts is so important. I was writing, actually. I'm writing a piece about Bruce Willis and aphasia, and how it is debilitating for an artist whose entire career is built on communicating, on words, on expression of words. No longer can express, no longer can connect. And I was thinking about this aphasia is a result of a trauma, like a stroke, other trauma. I think the country's been traumatized. And we are experiencing like a collective aphasia where there's people that are finding themselves unable to express themselves, and the words in their head and fair is a place for these people to express what it is they need to say, because at the heart of art is creative expression. It is expressing our words and our emotions through words and notes. And for me, it's always been conversation. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Guys, let's wrap it up with this. I'm going to frame something speaking for myself, but I also have the feeling I've got audience members who will agree with this. So let's say I don't want to give up on thinking about group disparities and injustices at a societal level. I want to still think about those things, but I don't want to lead with those things. When I'm teaching a student, when I am auditioning for a choir, when I am hiring for an orchestra, I want to lead in those situations with the individual that I'm dealing with. And so I want arts organizations to incorporate a more fair, in that sense, pro-human approach. How do I get involved in fair? How do I get involved in fair in the arts? What are the different types of opportunities specifically that you'd have for a listener who says, "Hey, this is what I've been looking for"?
We have so much going on. I can just say, fairforall.org is the main website, but we have all sorts of things that we're working on and building and hoping to offer people, which includes a K-12 curriculum that, anyone who's involved in a school, and anyone who's an administrator or a teacher and wants to implement these, it's an honest and pro-human way of, dealing with, discussing our nation's history in a way that isn't divisive, in a way that doesn't use children or anybody as avatars for any particular part of that history. It's our collective history, and it's also about our collective overcoming of many of those things. So, high school ethnic studies course, professional development for teachers, learning strategies. We also have a DEI program. We care very much about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but in the true meaning of those words, as Brent said earlier, true diversity, which means diversity of thought and diversity of perspective, not just diversity of melanin. And equity as in, the quality of being fair and impartial, the real definition of that word. We care very much about that. And we care very much about inclusion. We're very much about, if someone draws a circle to exclude us, we draw a bigger circle to include them. So we have programs that, we can implement them in schools. We can implement them at, businesses and institutions, organizations. So Fair Diversity is another program that we have. And then, of course, we have Fair in the Arts. I'll let Brent take it away with Fair in the Arts.
Yeah, fairinthearts.org, folks. Come join us. We have one of the most important parts of Fair in the Arts is our community, and just the ability to have a platform where people who are interested in our mission and what we're advocating for, want to be a part of the conversation, can join us on community platforms. So we have a forum where you're welcome to join us. Visit fairinthearts.org to learn more. And down the line, we're also producing various events. We have regular Zoom meetups with our community. We're going to be having live events, and we have broader visions of also grants, because we want to give opportunities to all artists who have something to say, and we believe in the freedom to create. So we want to champion grants, commissions, opportunities for artists. So we have a lot planned. It's just the beginning. It's just the beginning, and you're invited. You're invited.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All are welcome.
That's great.
For sure.
That's great. Even the people who are listening to this and thinking we are just extremely off our rockers and
Yes.
maybe well, because of course,
them.
and maybe even racist, because I've seen Instagram memes that say specifically, if you hear someone talking about one human race, then they might be racist. I've actually seen that.
Wow.
I've actually seen it, and not as a joke.
And I guess there's a genuine concern there, but you're welcome. Come on in, call us racist.
Yep.
We'll prove to you we're not. You're welcome as well. We're not rejecting anybody.
That's great. That's great.
So-
Michelle, anything you want to add on the way out?
No, I think we covered it. Come join us. I would love to have a conversation with you, even if you call me racist. I'd still love to have a conversation. Because that's how we move forward.
That's awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you all for sticking around to hear that panel conversation. I think it's important. I think we need to expand and include and diversify our conversation about all of these things, because it's a very complicated topic. As it's a complicated topic, as equally as complicated as humans are, which is so many layers, so many onion-like. Peel it back and you're still going to never quite get to the center, because we are infinitely complex. And that's why I like being a music educator and an ensemble music educator, because everything in our ensembles is just, you can't pin down what's going to happen from day to day, because the humans are so complex that we work with. It makes the music better and makes the art better. And that's what it's all about. So thank you for sticking around. If you support the mission of this show, join and support for as little as $3 a month over at patreon.com/Choralosophy. Also enter your promo code Choralosophy at Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, graphitepublishing.com, and ryanmain.com. And as always, like, share, comment on the Choralosopher's Facebook page about topics. Start a conversation there. If you hear something on the show that you want to talk more about, do it there, and or send me an email, choralosophy@gmail.com, or you can go to choralosophy.com on the main page and drop some comments in a form there, where I can keep it organized and try to get back to everybody in a timely manner. But at least if you put it in the form there, I won't lose it. So that's important. So thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next time.